Right. That's so funny. I just heard it say it on your computer. I've never heard that
Yeah.
before.
Like, all
This
right.
meeting is being recorded. Um, so here we are today, and I got a ping to reach out to Steph. I'll let her introduce herself in just a moment. I got a ping to reach out to Steph and have a conversation about immunity. And the reason that I followed through with this is that I do listen to those messages from spirit, and I trust that there's something in this conversation that's really important to be shared in this container that we're creating. And also, it's interesting timing because at the time of this recording, the world is opening back up truly in a big way for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic started. And back in the fall or months ago, we heard all these conversations about immune boosting foods and supplements and what you can do for your immunity. And I think that there's still importance in that conversation, even now, and especially now, as we feel like we are out of the woods. I'm not to say if we are or if we're not, like I can't predict the future. But I do think that there's something important to be shared there. And so hopefully this conversation will support folks in this moment and also in future moments when we do enter a sickness season again. So welcome to my virtual table. Dr. Stephanie Brown, do you want to just introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I, first of all, just want to say I felt really honored that you got a ping to have this conversation with me. My original training is I'm an optometrist, which is an eye doctor. Some people don't know that term. So that's where my training began. But the first couple years that I was in practice, I truly, talking about pings, just had this visceral feeling that what I was speaking, because that's what I learned in school, there was just so much more. And that sent me on a journey of learning a lot of holistic, natural medicines. I studied with a lot of different teachers who also graduated from medical school, but then they had this kind of awakening that there was more. So I studied under a lot of different doctors, learning their methods, and started introducing that into my practice. And I'm currently in a program, it's a 5-year program called Wisdom School, which goes into a lot of these holistic practices to make them tangible. First for yourself, to be your own healer, and then to help teach others. So that's kind of how I got into all of this stuff.
Amazing. And yeah, I think that's an important point, and a reason I think from like the rational mind. And I very much operate from, okay, and I see this in my birth chart, like here's all my Capricorn, like the hard worker that knows what to do, very practical, very grounded. And then I also have this Pisces side that's like dreamer, playing in the astral realm, like going off and, listening to the pings. But you have this beautiful background of the traditional medical training, and you have a lot more wisdom on like the science side of things than I could ever hope or dream or even want to know. But I think that it is important to have that balance, and then to have the conversation too with there is more than just the science. There is the emotional, the energetic, the spiritual, and I think we're going to touch on all ranges of the spectrum here today. So we set an intention before this call, or I wrote down an intention that I think that you are cool with, but I'll say it out loud just so everyone else knows and we can get on the same page, is that we want to share some practices for staying healthy no matter the season, and empower anyone listening to take their well-being into their own hands and I'll add to that in a little greater way. This doesn't mean that you have to go off the grid and like build your own house and make your own medicine. Like, I might be headed there sometime soon, but you don't have to be. I know Steph is not headed there full time. But to take your health in your own hands in some way, to feel more empowered to make decisions from your own, we could say, intuition or just self-empowerment. And specifically, like I mentioned before, this is important to note, and maybe we'll touch on this during the conversation in more depth, but a lot of holistic healing practices or more natural health practices take time to work. It's more about small doses over time, practices that you do every day, foods you eat every day, supplements you take every day to support you. Whereas a lot of medicine, I'll use medicine in the traditional term, is acute. Is that the correct word?
Yeah.
It's like, it's fast acting and you just do it in the moment. And so we wanted to have this conversation now so that folks could, I think that too, with like travel and summer and play, like there's beauty in that. There's things that add to our health. And also, like, we might be wearing down our immune systems from that, especially after a year of like being inside, being a little isolated. So yeah, the information now that you can use now to build your immune system, to boost your overall well-being, so that when cold and flu season comes around again, because it will, you will be better prepared to handle that. Does that sound good? Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just in terms of medicine, and we'll say conventional medicine.
Yeah, let's use that term.
Because we'll also talk about other medicines. But yes, conventional medicine, I believe it's become very reductionist and mechanistic. And yes, conventional medicine, pharmaceutical drugs, their end target is a specific receptor to turn it on or turn it off. And then some of the practices that we're going to be talking about in terms of building your immunity, they're more to help that immune system so that if you come into contact with a pathogen, you can respond appropriately. Because there's an over response, there's an under response, and both of those are not necessarily the best for our well-being. So what practices can we do every day to keep our immune system in a place so that when we have to respond, we respond appropriately instead of over responding or under responding, which there's a lot of research that supports that the conventional medicine approach and how we want to just very much turn it off and turn it off now is kind of why we're dealing with a lot of this chronic illness and issues with our immune system response in the first place.
Cool. I think that's an interesting point, and maybe not even for this conversation, but just a note of like how our bodies operate. It is on a spectrum, and both over response of the immune system and an under response of the immune system can be problematic. And so it's not just, this isn't the same, but I know sometimes people, like when they get that like kale is healthy for you, they're like, oh my God, let me eat kale in everything.
Right.
Let me put kale in my smoothies, kale salad for lunch, kale in my soup for dinner. And, I don't think you're going to overdose on kale, but like there is too much of a good thing. And it's not just, and this is like, we'll get into this later, maybe the more like spiritual or emotional or next level side of immunity, is like, you don't just want to build up your defense. Like, you don't want to just live in a castle, a fortress that you don't ever go out into the world and interact. You want to have a system that is, and I think this is in some of your notes, like appropriately reactive and can react to the things that comes its way. We could say that is about a human as a whole yeah.
Oh, totally. That whole idea of being responsive instead of reactive.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start with just for everyone listening, and also for me too, because you taught me some things as we were planning for this, is defining like, what is the immune system? Because we hear this a lot, and I think we heard it a lot over the last year and a half in specifically of, oh, your immunity, your immune response. Like, what is this immune system?
Such a great question to start with. So I like to think about it in terms of we have two distinct immune systems. And before I get started,
No, we have two distinct immune systems. That's probably news for most folks.
two distinct immune systems, two separate immune systems. And Dr. Thomas Cowan is one of my great teachers on this. He's written a lot about immunity. So if this is something that's sparking things in you and you want to look into it more, he's a great resource. He's taught me so much. But starting with this two distinct immune system concept. So we have a cell-mediated immune system or innate immune system. And I think that word kind of helps us to understand what it does. So our innate immune system, and then we have our humoral or our adaptive immune system. So first we're going to talk about our innate immune system. So that is our first line of defense when we encounter a pathogen. And our innate immune system working properly is crucial to our health. So just to bring it back around to what we were talking about in the introduction, this is where if our innate immune system over responds or under responds, it can be a big issue in terms of how we recover from the pathogen. We want an equal response, like that whole idea of like, does the punishment fit the crime? So
like, yeah, like I can see even just like, I keep going back to like food allergies for some reason. Because again, my history is like gut health and that sort of thing. Like, okay, if you become insensitive to gluten, you eat like a crumb of gluten, you break out in hives, like that feels like an over response.
Absolutely. Yep.
I don't know what the under response would be, but anyways, that's what I'm thinking, like an over inflammation or chronic inflammation.
Exactly. So we want our cell mediated or innate immune system to respond appropriately. And it's crucial to our health because our cell mediated, let's just call it innate moving forward. Our innate immune system is how we detoxify. It's how we clear disease cells from the body. It's how we eliminate toxins from the body. So we can think about this, and again, thank you, Thomas Cowan, for this analogy, but I really liked it. We can think about a robust innate immune response like a house that takes out its garbage. And if a house cannot take out its garbage, the toxins build up, and that's how we can get really sick. So let's talk through an example. Thinking about chickenpox, that's something that we're all familiar with. So when we first encounter chickenpox, it goes into our respiratory tract, infecting thousands, if not millions of cells. Now, these cells are dysfunctional, dysregulated, they're diseased, and we need a way to eliminate them. So our innate immune system, its job is to eliminate these diseased or dysfunctional cells. So it comes in to clear house. So in other words, this being sick, right, Koso, back to the chickenpox example, chickenpox, respiratory system, infects cells, then we get a rash. That rash is our body's way of expressing these disease or dysfunctional cells and getting them out of the body, and then we heal. And that process takes about 7 to 10 days. So that is the innate immune system. What we call being sick is our innate immune system's response to that pathogen. So number one take-home message to start is that a healthy immune system is not suppressing or deactivating our natural immune response. Kind of bringing back to our introduction when we talked about this reductionist or very reactive way of conventional medicine, that is suppressing symptoms. And if we suppress symptoms, that's our body's way of clearing the toxins. So if we're suppressing our symptoms, then we're holding the garbage. We're not able to properly excrete the garbage. And if you do that enough times, garbage is just sitting in your cells. Obviously, you're not going to have ultimate well-being, ultimate health. Ultimate health.
Ultimate health. Yeah. I think this is such a good point, and it's one that like I maybe people know, but they don't fully know, is that first of all, the symptom is not the cause. Okay, that's obvious. But we do treat symptoms. We have gotten into this place where we treat symptoms instead of trusting that like our body does know what to do. Like we have survived for how many years? And how many years before modern medicine? And like, don't at me with like, oh, people only lived 35 years in the Paleolithic age. It's like, I know. And also, I don't know for sure because I wasn't there.
Right. Also, there's a lot of archaeological evidence to say that humans did live till 95 years old. So
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Trust the doctor
Yeah.
on that one. But
Yeah.
like the symptom is not the problem. And I have a better analogy than like the gluten thing. That was not totally appropriate, but I understand why my mind was hooking onto it, because that can be, food allergies can be an overactive immune system, by the way. Not really what we're going to go into here today, but like think about this, and this is something that might be news to folks, but maybe not. When you have an emotional response to something, that is your body moving through a feeling, moving through something that happened to you, whether it's hard, it's grief, it's sadness, it's anger, it's worry. The emotion is not a problem unless you suppress it. And then you get to this place where it's like, well, I'm never sad, but I'm never happy either. And then something happens and it breaks the system and I explode one day. And so I think that that's another interesting way to like think about this, is maybe think about a time when you have just let a symptom run its course, whether for you can relate more to like an emotion, like, oh, I was feeling really down, I let myself listen to some moody music and then I cried and danced and I felt better. Or you can think of a time where you were not feeling great and you just let it ride, yourself ride it out, took care of yourself, and you felt better afterward. So great point, and great like perspective shift of symptoms are not necessarily problems.
I love how you related that to an emotion, because
I thought you'd like that.
And it's very similar. Yeah. So that's the innate immune system. So then after our innate immune system, we get sick, we clear it back to perfect health within 7 to 10 days. We have our—
Is that true for just chicken pox or most viruses?
Most pathogens.
Pathogens.
Yeah.
Pathogens. Great.
Pathogens. Yeah. Most pathogens, 7 to 10 days. Once we get
Which, by the way, is way longer than most people would allow to like check out of work. Usually it's like, okay, you're allowed to be out 2 days, 3 days. I mean, I haven't been in the corporate world for a really long time, but like 7 to 10 days, folks, to clear it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Yep. If it goes beyond 10 days, then that is a signal that your innate immune system isn't working properly, because it should be 7 to 10 days. So then after that, once you're restored to perfect health, your second immune system kicks in. And your second immune system is called the adaptive immune system. So in the name, we can kind of already start getting an idea of what it is. And this is where, when you really think about this, our bodies are so smart. You know, we live in the world of social media where we see this like, you know, the answers, wisdom is inside of you. But this is where you can really connect to that idea, because your body, without you having to tell it anything, learns from this sickness, from encountering this pathogen. Once it gets to the other side, it wouldn't be conducive to a full life if every time we encountered this same pathogen, we're getting sick, we're getting taken out 7 to 10 days, right? Then we're just going to be on this sick hamster wheel or treadmill situation. So our body learns.
Yeah, you just literally like keep passing it around your family or your household.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a great example. And that wouldn't be conducive. So our body is super, super smart. After we get over the pathogen, it then recognizes the pathogen. So back to the chickenpox example, the second time it goes into our respiratory tract, it signals the adaptive immune system to release an antigen or an antibody. We don't have to fully go into the science there, but to release a response to clear the pathogen, and you never get sick. It never activates your innate immune system. So you're not going to get a rash anymore if we're talking about chickenpox. And once we can go through that and have that experience, not suppressing the symptoms, we can get to the point where we can learn the response. But back to this idea of if we're constantly doing antibiotics or steroids, which is anti-inflammatories, or antipyretics, which reduces a fever, we're not allowing our body to go through the whole process. And it's possible that our adaptive immune system won't have the opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
So then we can be stuck on that chronic hamster wheel of sickness, which is where a lot of research is showing where autoimmunity kind of starts to come in.
Super interesting. It's super interesting. And I have like flashbacks of like being taught some of this stuff in school, but not to a level, and we don't need to go into why, but like not to a level of understanding just how powerful, just how smart our bodies are. Like your body, I've said this before and I will say it again, our bodies are the most super complex computer systems, better than a computer system out there. And even though doctors and science and researchers have found out so much, and I am 100% not anti-conventional medicine. It 100% has a place, like, and when we can talk about that, but the innate state of your body is health. It wants to get back there, and you don't have to, I don't know, we think of the body as being dumb, as being animalistic. And let me tell you, if you watch, there's a show on Netflix called Night on Earth. It's a new one. Definitely watch it if you haven't already. But any sort of nature show where you see these animals that move and hunt and like sense at night and know how to mate and follow their trails home after like thousands of miles, without the level of consciousness that we say that we have, like there is so much within us. And I want folks to just, if they take something away from this part of the conversation, is to know like how powerful, how smart, how adaptive your body really is, and to perhaps trust it a little bit more. Trust it a little bit more instead of like, which we'll go into, like living in fear and every time you have a headache, like take an aspirin. Right. And it's super cool to know that, because I think too, especially with COVID this last year and a half, I guess it's been it's been around for a year and a half at this point. We got so scared of like pathogens. And the truth is, and not to say that there shouldn't have been some sort of restrictions, like especially when something is new, there is like a risk around that, but like we are exposed to these things every single day. And like, for the most part, your body knows how to handle them.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the fact that for only 10,000 years have we really been civilized in terms of having a house that separates us from our environment. And so at the end of the day, really we're animals meant to interact with our environment. And to your point, there's bacteria and viruses in the air that we breathe. And our ultimate well-being is when we can live among those things without them taking us out. Our body knows how to do that. But when we separate ourselves from the environment, then our body, it forgets. Then it does look at the environment as something to fear, something to put a defense up, something to mount an immune response to. But when we live with our environment, in partnership with our environment, our bodies then know how to live in partnership with bacteria and viruses, because we've done that for millions of years. So.
Well, and something we talked about when we were just planning this chat is how for a while, and I think that this is still perpetrates a lot of people's belief systems, that like bacteria is bad.
Yes.
We have antibacterial soap. We have, kids going to school with their little squirt things.
Sanitizing everything.
The antibacteria. And then it, like in more recent years, and I was exposed to this again because I struggled with all these digestive issues and started learning about the gut and gut health, which we will probably talk about because it's heavily connected to a healthy immune system. but like your body needs we are more bacteria, right? Than
Yeah,
we are
we are more bacteria
human
and
cells.
viruses than we are human DNA. Like to the 10 times more. I don't forget. I think it's like 10 to the ninth times. Don't quote me on that, but just to give you an idea of how much more
1
bacteria.
million times more.
Exactly. Exactly.
We
Exactly.
are a lot more bacteria
Yes.
than we are human cells. And now you see like probiotics that are like made from dirt. And like, I think
Yes.
these products are cool, but like, go put your hands in the dirt, go be in your
Get
environment,
dirty.
and
Exactly.
your body will balance itself.
Exactly.
Um,
Not to get too much on a tangent, but I did see a
oh,
commercial the other
love
day of
tangents.
a soap that like has dirt microbes so that you can like shower yourself in it. My initial thought was like, why don't you just go roll in the dirt?
It was probably like $50 a
Yeah.
bottle
Oh, it
too.
was so expensive.
And truthfully, like I understand, like I think it is one step forward that we're acknowledging this, but it also connects back to like totally different conversation, but like toxic capitalism where everything has to be a product and everything has to be
Uh,
sold, which I'm sure, and again, not the topic of this conversation, is heavily linked into why our medical system is the way that it is, why certain things are the way that they are. But there, it's interesting to me to see these trends in health and wellness and see these biohackers that are cryotherapy, cold showers. It's like we used to not have heated water.
right.
That was a cold shower, just
Right.
going back to like more primitive ways of doing things, more natural ways of doing things before we came in and like tried to play, I don't know, the taskmaster or
Yeah,
something.
I was gonna say play God
Um,
a little bit.
yeah, totally, totally. And I say that too with like love for the human species and like all of us where we're at, because I do feel like we had to swing in one direction a certain way for us to come to a better place of balance. And like that's how evolution happens. It doesn't happen in a straight line. It happens in a spiral or ups and downs over time.
Yeah, I mean, you can even think about that. I know that resonated with me when I 4 years ago made a huge change in my health and I took a deep dive. I did kind of get into a rabbit hole almost
Mhm.
of like wanting to control every single thing that went into my body, every single movement, every right, because you're learning this new material. But then you kind of the pendulum swings and you kind of come back to a more grounded, centered place where you can make these decisions without having to feel like you have to control every single little thing. And
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because, as you know, something that I teach about and am constantly exploring is this idea of intuition and our intuition as our best guide for our body choices, for our life choices. And we have been taught through a lot of our schooling that somebody else has the right decision for you, that doctors know the best thing to do about your health, that that your teachers know the best thing for you to do about your brains and your like career or counselor, that your parents, we're taught that there's people outside of us that know what's best for us.
mm,
And there are times and places to go to a teacher, to go to a mentor, to go to a doctor, to go to an expert, a specialist, but like ultimately your intuition is you. It's this primal sense of you that knows, oh, like maybe lay off the refined sugar for a little bit. Or for me, like what I hear I hear mine all the time, all day, every day. But like, especially going back to this conversation around immunity, if I feel like I'm kind of coming down with something, whether it is and I haven't been real sick in like a long time. I had the flu when I first moved to New York, which is so interesting. I think we did talk about this.
ah,
I got the flu and was out for like a week when I first moved to New York.
mm,
Huge shift in environment,
yes.
huge stressor on my system. But since then I've maybe like had a little bit of a cold once or twice. But when I feel myself coming down with something, it's usually like what I hear is like hydrate, sweat. Like there's these things, and I know if I do that, I can like move through it. But it's taken time to unlearn the noise and also trust myself, because that's not something that's very productive on a one-to-one level to our capitalist society. Trust yourself in, okay, I need to like take it easy, or I need to take a rest, or I can trust myself to move through this at this stage. And then also trust yourself when you know you need to like ask for support.
Right. Totally. I mean, this whole idea of knowledge is power. So learning some basics, which is what we're going over today, so that maybe next time you do feel like you're a little bit down, or your energy is off, or something's going on, you have that trust that you can just sit and take a beat, and maybe more look within to see what that imbalance is coming from. And then, if a couple days goes by, that again, that's where you can kind of check in, and then maybe I do need a guide or a teacher or someone to kind of help direct me. But being able to first check in with yourself, again, like you said, that's not something that we're taught at all. So building that muscle, hugely important, and you've helped me a lot with that over the
Thanks.
years.
Yeah. And if anybody else feels like they're at a place where they need support in reconnecting to that muscle, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I am happy, more than happy to support you. So let's talk about how we can support our immune system, either the innate or cell mediated. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
So, yep, you got it. Yeah. So supporting, we want, like we've been talking about, a robust innate immune system, one that doesn't over respond or under respond. We want it balanced. So when we think about this immune system, and shout out to Ben Greenfield, I read one of his books that really helped. I'm very visual, so this kind of helped me visualize the immune system. We have 6 organs, or organ systems, I guess you can call them, that are in control of this innate immune system. So I'm just going to
Also,
go.
we'll put some links to some of these things you're referencing here too.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'll kind of just breeze over them, because then we're going to get into the weeds of how to support all six parts. But we have our lymph system, which is all throughout our body, and that is our drainage filtration system. We have our respiratory system that's lined with mucus to help trap pathogens. We have our skin, which contains 20 billion white blood cells. And that actually educates and informs our entire immune system, because it's our first defense, right? Our skin. Lymphocytes, which these are the white blood cells that destroy and pathogens and orchestrate our immune response. There's a ton of different lymphocytes. That's beyond the scope of this discussion today. We have our spleen, which stores white blood cells and filters toxins from the blood. And then we have our gut. And this is something that gets a lot of attention, as it should.
Yeah.
Because 60% of our immune system, so more than half, 60% of our immune system lives right underneath our intestines and is intricately related. And just to kind of bring it back around to this idea of gluten that you brought up, because I think it is a really important point, because a lot of us can be intolerant to gluten, and there's a reason for that. So your intestine, and you can remember back to biology if that's the last time you thought about this, but it goes like this, right? It's like that windy thing that sits right in the middle of our bodies. And right underneath that is 60% of our immune system. And so we have these tight junctions, and I just like to kind of think about them like this. Sorry.
I'm visual too. Go for it.
Yeah.
So we're doing this in video.
So our tight junctions, they lock like this, and the tight junctions are on our intestine. Their job is to open up a little bit when good vitamins and nutrients come from our food, so that it can be absorbed into our bloodstream and circulate and keep us healthy and nourished. That's how our whole body gets nourished. But these tight junctions, they're supposed to open and close, and only open a little bit. But
Mm.
gluten, and there's other things that insult these tight junctions, but gluten is the number one, besides
Mhm.
refined sugar, insult of these tight junctions, is that gluten can create micro inflammation at the tight junction. So where they used to open and close, now they open and they don't fully close. And
Mm.
that's a huge problem, because if those tight junctions don't fully close, then you're just having a leaking of toxins that you're ingesting that are supposed to be processed and excreted. But now you have a
Mhm.
direct line for them to be let out of the intestine through these tight junctions. And then 60% of your immune system is sitting right underneath. So it's activating your immune
Your
system,
immune response.
your
Interesting.
immune response. Exactly, exactly. And so when that continues to happen over and over again in the research, we're seeing that this is a huge kind of root cause of autoimmunity,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's where we can start to become, and bringing it to your idea of these of allergies, that's how we can develop allergies later in life. This was something that always I was very just curious about, because I was like, oh, you have allergies when you're born and that's what you have. And then I have so many of
Mhm.
my patients sitting in front of my chair, especially this, oh my gosh, this spring being a perfect
Mhm.
example. They're suffering from allergies. They're 50 years old. They've never had allergies before. What's going on? One, we haven't been in our environment, right? That whole idea of we have been
Yeah.
interacting with our environment, all of a sudden we're coming out and our body is in shock. But another reason that we develop allergies over time is these tight junctions that have inflammation that's just allowing a leak right to our immune system, and creating a response inappropriately.
It's super interesting. I think learning about this is super interesting. And I was never like very into biology or human anatomy in high school or college, or even when I went through yoga teacher training, because well, it probably just wasn't the right time for me, but also it felt very clinical of like, tell me where the small intestine is. Tell me where the long intestine, the large intestine
Large.
is.
Yeah.
Small intestine is actually longer. But learning about like these amazing features of your body, like just think that's happening all the time. These junctions and how it's so nuanced. You don't have to think about it, that your body lets out the nutrients and puts the nutrients into your cells and then filters out the toxins.
Mhm.
So I think it's cool to learn about this from a more nuanced level, or from somebody who, like you, is able to speak to it with heart, with soul, because yeah, the clinical approach never got me interested. And so I was just always very disconnected from my body. And now I'm like, if I do have a symptom or feeling, it's like, okay, well, what's going on there? Like, this is a part of me. This could be a communication, or it could just be something moving through.
Yeah.
And something that I found super interesting when I first restarted studying gut health is that your digestive tract from mouth to anus is a tube. And technically, your whole digestive tract is outside of you. I mean, there's like the inside is actually your outsides. And so that's one of the like how we talk about skin being a barrier and it's where the environment hits you. It's also your whole digestive tract, because your food that's coming in, whatever you're consuming, is being filtered there. Uh, so it makes sense. But I love that you outline these six, because I think the gut has gotten a lot of attention recently, which is great. Thank God. Thank Goddess. But it'll be curious for us to go into these other ones. And I love the lymph system. Also, Pisces is connected to the lymph system, if you didn't know that.
I do.
But I'm just like, I think it's a really cool part of the body that nobody talks about. And
Yeah.
so we'll talk about it a little bit here today, and how to engage with your lymph.
Yes. Yeah, because to your point, the gut has gotten a lot of attention in media, because, and yes, 60% is there, but where's the other 40%, right? There's still a lot more going on. So that leads us into talking about these six components of the immune system and how we can support them for ultimate well-being. So the lymph, number one. So we want to move lymph throughout the body. And just a quick
How do
note.
you just, yeah, how do you
Yeah.
describe lymph? Because I'm like, it's this fluid in the body that helps take out the trash,
Yes.
but it doesn't have its own pump.
Correct.
What I always say to people.
Exactly. It doesn't. So lymph nodes, right? You can just think of like a node, maybe just like a circular thing that's pumping fluid, but it doesn't have its own pump. So how does it move? It moves from your muscles around it, which is why physical activity and making sure that you do low level and high levels of physical activity, that is what actually pushes the lymph to filter the fluid. So if you're stagnant, the fluid is stagnant because it doesn't have its own pumping mechanism.
It's like you it's gonna be really graphic. Like in your house, going back to the body house analogy, which I'm a huge fan of. That's like a big thing we talk about in Katona yoga, and has also been another layer of me understanding my body and how it works. But like, you can poop in the toilets, but if you don't flush them, you're going to have a stinky house.
Yes.
So like you have to actually flush your toilets. You have to actually go move your lymph.
Yes, exactly. I love that analogy. That's great. Yep. So that's where physical activity comes in. Rebounding, jumping on a trampoline, or you can even just like shake, full body shakes, do the same thing, vibration plate. Chiropractic care really helps lymph. Just a quick note about chiropractic care. I always love to say to my patients, because it's kind of concise, but the way I like to think about health is good health, or perfect health, is good communication between the whole body. And our communication highway is our spine. So if our spine is not in good alignment and it's tweaked at any point, that is going to, one, impede lymph and fluid from draining out, but also communication, because our body is always talking to itself. We think about our brain being here, but every single organ has its own brain that's giving information and feeding back and forth. So
Preach.
chiropractic care, yeah. Woo. So chiropractic care helps with that. Sweating, something Emily brought up before, sweating from exercise. Infrared sauna helps move the lymph. Dry brushing, something that I keep trying to get myself in the habit of, but cannot, but it's very helpful. Hydration, half your body weight in ounces of water. Massage, this can be foam rolling or self-massage. And loose clothing, this was very interesting to me. And I personally, not to give too much information, but I'm the queen of oversharing. I stopped wearing
There's no TMI. There's no TMI with me. This has come up recently. Someone's like, I think this might be TMI. I'm like, you don't understand. You would have to do a lot to shock me.
Right.
But yes, let's go. Yeah. I hate bras too.
Yeah, I hate them. Underwire, not a fan. I already knew like I wasn't comfortable in them, but again, just society, and I'm a doctor and the professional, that whole thing. But once I learned this, I ditched bras forever. But the underwire hits in where your lymph nodes are. And so when they're constricted, they can't flow and create this movement that we want. So thinking about bras being too tight. And for men, like really tight fitting boxers, same thing. Men have lymph in a lot of lymph nodes in their testes. So if they're too tight, then they can't properly filter.
I think that's also an interesting thing. Like, I'm wearing a sports bra top right now. And whereas it's definitely like looser than maybe some traditional bras, but like for women, people with boobs that are wearing tighter tops, like I don't like to be in this all day. Like, let yourself be free. That's step one for moving your lymph. You don't even have to do anything. Just take off your bra.
Yeah, absolutely. So the second pillar, talking about our respiratory system, we can support our respiratory system and have open airways from essential oils. A lot of studies show they help open up our airways. And then breath work, yoga, mindfulness, meditation practices, all of those, when you're thinking about breathing in, thinking about breathing out. I know, and a lot of meditation teachers tell you about your diaphragm, your belly, make sure it's
Mhm.
distending. And the reason you want your belly to distend is because it's pushing on your diaphragmatic muscles. And the
Mhm.
stronger your muscles are, the better your body is at moving in and moving out. And that mucosal layer that is in our respiratory system is what traps a lot of our pathogens. So if we're taking these like right shallow breaths all day long, we can't clearly move things through. So that's
Yeah.
a really important point there too. Then we move on to the skin. So we want to limit pathogens passing through the skin. This is where we've all heard sunlight, vitamin D is good for us. The reason is vitamin D modulates your entire immune system through your skin.
So that's super interesting,
Yeah,
and I don't think I fully like knew that.
yeah.
So it's actually like getting it through your skin helps your immune system, just getting some sunlight.
Yes, huge. Because going back to the idea that we have 20 billion white blood cells in our skin that are informing and educating our immune system as a whole. And
Mhm.
vitamin D is what modulates, it's the receptor that attaches to those 20 billion white blood cells to inform the immune system to actually wake up, which is why I say getting sunlight within 30 minutes upon waking is one of the most important things for our immune system because it wakes it up. It alerts us that we're not sleeping anymore. We're not in rest mode. We're in our
Mhm.
go and enter the world mode. So it
Mm.
awakens in a way our defense in a good way, right? We talk about that over and under, but this is that
Mhm.
balance awakening our defense system to, okay, we're going to go out into the environment. So let's be on and be surveilling and in a surveillance mode of these pathogens so that we can trap them here and they don't
Mhm.
get into our bloodstream and activate us to have even a sickness. So yeah, it really starts there with vitamin D. And vitamin D supplementation is good. And I think there's an argument to be made that especially in the Northeast, just because we don't get as much sunlight, you can make an argument for that. But in the spring and the summer, there is no excuse. You don't need vitamin D supplements. We got to get outside more. We're inside way, way, way too much. And that's actually one of the main reasons that we get more sick in the fall and the winter. There's less vitamin D.
Less sunlight, less access to sunlight.
Exactly.
And I also heard, and this might be not, we don't have to go into detail here, but I also heard, and it makes sense to me, that the trees and the plants, everything that's green, acts as a filtration system for our air, which is how many pathogens travel, not all, but many pathogens travel through the air.
Yes.
So as soon as the leaves start to turn brown and fall, we have less of a natural filtration system before the things hit us. So double that down with then there being less sunlight, your immune system getting less of that vitamin D to modulate it. It makes sense why we have this season. It's not necessarily because there's more germs around.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And thinking about trees, and actually, when you put tree roots next to lungs, it looks exactly the same. So that's a perfect point that you just brought up because trees are filtering the air before it even gets to us so that our own lungs can then filter it. So, yeah, that's
Mm,
awesome.
super interesting.
Great point to bring up there. And then, this idea that's gotten a lot of attention, but there is a lot of truth to it of just being mindful of the ingredients of the products that you use on your skin. This whole idea of antibacterial killing everything. We have, just like we have a gut microbiome or gut flora that is our defense,
Mhm.
we also have a skin microbiome. So it's very normal for us to have bacteria and viruses on our skin that's helping
Mm.
fight off those bacteria and viruses from getting inside of us. So if we over sterilize our skin, that we are killing one of our defense mechanisms, quite literally.
Yeah.
So that's important to be mindful of.
It's
there's
okay to be
a
a
lot of,
little dirty. It's okay to
yeah,
not
totally.
like
Totally.
scrub yourself raw every shower.
Yeah. Yeah. There is.
I'm super healthy.
Exactly.
um,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just recap what we went over so far.
Yes.
Lymph system, you got to move it.
Mhm.
We talked about a lot of ways you can do that. Respiratory system, opening up the airways, breath work, meditation, maybe essential oils. I would even say I'm a big essential oil fan, but like if you don't have essential oils, use natural scents, orange, lemon,
Yes.
eucalyptus, like put it in your shower. You don't have to have the actual oil.
Yep.
Um, Limit the pathogens than your skin. So proper sunlight, and also not just like sterilizing everything, and knowing that like your skin is an organ. Again, I think that's something that more and more people are becoming aware of these days, like with natural products and that sort of thing. But what you put on your skin is like, would you want to consume that? Would
Totally.
you want to consume that?
It's absorbed. Anything we put on our skin is absorbed within 7 seconds, and our bloodstream is right underneath our skin. So it goes right to the bloodstream, circulates around the whole body.
And that, even like most people talk about products like deodorant and lotions, which again, you are putting right on your skin. Something, and I am not perfect at this, but something I'm trying to be more aware of too is because, again, what we started this conversation with is this is not just like a quick fix. This is a whole lifestyle shift, but also the fabrics of the clothes that you're wearing, and especially clothes that you might be wearing in the sun or that you might be sweating in, because that, like, it's translating to you, you're being impacted by it, or your sheets that you're sleeping on. So again, we could go into a whole other conversation there, and maybe there will be one at some point, but just something to be mindful of. And I think with this, everything that we're presenting here today, take some low hanging fruit first. Like if there's something easy you can start to do, maybe it is, jumping on a mini trampoline or dry brushing, or just doing 5 minutes of meditation. Like take something that works for you, and then you can start to make bigger changes over time.
Yes. Yes. I love that point, because for me, whenever I've wanted to make a change, because I want to do so many things, I think you said this either to me or at a retreat I was on of yours, but like you can do anything, but you
Yeah.
can't do everything.
Can't do
So,
everything.
yeah,
And the stress of trying, we'll talk about stress, but like
right.
the stress of trying to do everything, or if you start to think like, oh my God, everything in my house is toxic, like this fake
Yeah,
fur thing here is toxic, like
right.
that probably is just as bad for you. So when you talk about the biology of belief, like
Yes.
that is probably just as bad for you as being like, okay, I'm okay where I'm at. I'm going to take these small steps, and I will change. I will do an overhaul, or make a bigger change over time.
Right.
Okay. Should we move through the
So
next
yes,
three?
let's move through the next three. So number four is the lymphocytes. Those are our white blood cells, and we want to keep those levels modulated, specifically the natural killer cells. Not going to go into that too much because really beyond the scope of here. But again, the same idea is we don't want too many natural killer cells, and we don't want too little. We want them modulated. So just quickly, in terms of the research of what helps keep these natural killer cells at an optimal level: exercise, like we talked about, massage, and then a couple supplements: curcumin, zinc, selenium, astragalus, spirulina, blueberry, and yeah, blueberry. I was like, did I say that wrong? And melatonin. And melatonin. So you can get those all from your diet as well. Curcumin is an extract of turmeric. Zinc is in a lot of seeds like pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds. And
I
then
think
number
I
five,
think Brazil nuts have selenium.
they do. Yeah, they do. A lot of
Pulling
selenium.
that nutrition information out of my ass.
Oh yeah.
Still got it.
Yep, strengthening the spleen. I actually thought this was really interesting when I learned this actually in preparing for this call. But when you eat slow or practice mindful eating, it informs your spleen. And your spleen, again, is where you store and filter your blood. So again, it's a filtration system. So you want it working perfectly. I think Robin Euclid says this, but your stomach doesn't have teeth. So we have to chew our food first. That's kind of where it all starts. And then, watching the amount of refined sugars. A lot of refined sugars are detrimental to our gut health and really not good for our spleen. And
Yeah,
then,
I'm interested in, I was interested, this was something that I didn't really connect to or didn't know the importance of the spleen. And I'm interested just from like a curiosity standpoint in exploring that more. Cause like in Chinese medicine, the spleen is the organ connected to the, like the sense of sweetness.
yes.
And oftentimes we overload, this is definitely a tangent, but like we overload like sweets because there's like a missing sweetness in our life. And I don't fully know the connection between the blood and the filtration and the sweetness, but that would be, I'm going to look more into that because that's super interesting to me.
Yeah, I've definitely found in my life when there isn't enough sweetness, I crave more sugar. So
Hey.
totally. And then the last thing to support is repairing and maintaining proper gut health. And this is something that does get a lot of attention. But bone broth is so, so, so healing for gut health. If I ever am just really feeling off, I'll just do a fast and just have bone broth and feel so much better after. Probiotics, there's a lot of controversy of which ones work and do they actually last. So I really just like to try to have about a quarter cup of fermented foods because they will give you the same probiotics that you're going to get in a supplement in the form that your body can definitely absorb. Doesn't mean that there aren't good probiotics. And I'm a big fan of, if you're going to take an antibiotic, definitely overload on probiotics to keep that healthy gut flora going. But fermented foods, I'm a huge fan of medicinal mushrooms. And if we're just talking about immunity, turkey tail, chaga, reishi, tremella. I don't know how to tremla. I'm just learning about this
Yeah,
one.
I don't know that one. I'm going to have to look it
Very,
up.
very powerful in terms of our immune system. And then bee products, honey, bee pollen, royal jelly, propolis. They're all different types of the hive and different things that the bee might excrete while making honey, but they're antimicrobial, antibacterial, antiviral. All three of the
So good for you.
exactly.
Food of the gods, food of the gods. Fun fact too, that I've been studying more, and I know you have too, been studying more like herbalism and natural remedies. And not only is honey something that's great to use inside of you, it's also one of the best like things to use in first aid in many ways, like on your skin. If you have a burn, if you have there's a lot of things that say honey is really a powerful because of all those things. And they make sense, just as we're talking about gut and skin are very connected. So yeah.
Such a good point. I've never even thought about it, but it makes total sense. Yeah.
So I will say too, I have a old, like this is something I made like 4 years ago, a gut health, or it's like a don't get sick guide. And I looked it over recently, and actually right before we got on here, and it's still very valid and touches on maybe high level, like 25% of the things that you've talked about here. So we'll link that somewhere in this video replay. So that way, like everyone will have this replay. We'll put some additional resources, or everyone will have this video. It's not really a replay if no one's here live, except for us. So, but that will also be, if you're feeling like, wow, all these things, I want to do all these things, you can reference that guide for like a few beginner steps. Or even more than beginner, of like where you can start with food and supplements and lifestyle changes. So do you want to talk about like what you recommend for sign of illness? Like so those are all the things we just talked about, like all the things that you can do to support your immune system on an ongoing basis, and things that maybe you do ramp up as we're heading into a more flu season, or if you're going to be traveling, if you're going to be exposed to like new environments, but there's a different response or something else that we want to do if we do feel a sickness coming on.
Yes. Yeah. So I have 6 things that I do at the first sign of illness, or if I have been exposed to a pathogen, like if I'm around someone that's sick, again, being a
Mm,
doctor, I'm in front of a lot of people. And first, just want to say, because I made a big point about how we don't want to suppress symptoms. So
yeah.
these remedies are to support your immune response. They're not suppressing anything. They're supporting your immune system responding appropriately. So I'm a big fan of vitamin C. Just a quick note about that. Your stomach can only absorb 500 milligrams at a time.
Mm,
So taking 500 milligrams every few hours will do a couple things. One, get your maximum absorption, and two, it won't upset your stomach. If you have too much ascorbic acid, which is vitamin C,
mm.
enterically in the stomach, it can give you really, really bad stomach aches and stomach issues. If you do happen to be in a town, like my town has an IV fix place, if you can go get an IV of vitamin C, bonus points for you. That ramp up your immune response and get you back to tip top shape quickly. Big fan of oregano oil. I take anytime I'm traveling a couple days before I travel, I take 2 pills. And then a couple days after I take 2. Quick note about this is this is if you feel sick, you don't want to be on oil of oregano for more than
Hmm.
10 days. Because then when you want to take it and you want it to have that really robust antiviral properties that it has, it's not going to work as well. So this
I've
is
also
really
heard that like about, we'll talk about, but either echinacea or elderberry. One of them you don't
echinacea.
echinacea you
Echinacea,
don't want to take
correct.
consistently. I mean, you can take it over the season or like acute period, but yeah, you want to use these things as needed.
Exactly. Yeah. Elderberry, you actually cannot overdose on. So
That's what I thought.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you got it. And then zinc acetate lozenges. I like Life Extension brand, but you want to let it dissolve under your tongue for 20 to 30 minutes and take it every 2 to 3 hours until symptoms subside. A big thing about zinc is either have it with a cup of green tea or quercetin capsules, which quercetin is the active
Mm,
ingredient in green tea. The reason that you want green tea with zinc is because that is what allows zinc to get into your cell so that it can stop viral replication. If you just have a bunch of zinc in your extracellular matrix, which is just the space in your body, it's not going to do what it needs to do. So you want the zinc in the green tea to get it in. It'll stop viral replication, which is why if you take it at your first sign of being exposed, you can really decrease the symptoms or the response in your body. Elderberry syrup. I personally take elderberry every day that I work because I'm around a lot of people.
mhm.
There's a syrup, there's an extract. Elderberry syrup does have a good amount of honey. So if you're someone that's sensitive to sugar, the extract is probably better for you because there's not as much sugar in it. Echinacea, just like Emily said, we don't want to be taking that every day. We want to use it for when we need it. That's 900 to 1500 milligrams split into 3 doses. Quick study, just because I'm a doctor and I love studies. And UConn, I live in Connecticut, so I was like proud of that. It showed that if you take echinacea during cold and flu season, it can cut the likelihood of a common cold by over half and decrease the duration by 1.5 days. So I thought
Wow.
that was pretty notable. And then honey, again, specifically Manuka honey, has been shown in studies to inhibit viral replication and been shown to be more effective than active ingredients in cold medications at both cough and sleep quality when you have an upper respiratory infection. So
Amazing. It's
those are
amazing.
that I like to do.
Um, Steph, you need to create like a guide. Maybe we can
Yeah.
co-create one together, release it during cold and flu season or before it.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is all super helpful. And again, like these are a lot of these I'm like aware of, but it's helpful to have your scientific brain and the specific dosages and the studies because there is a lot of like, I don't know, there's just like a lot of information out there.
Uh-huh.
And I want people to have more specifics and a reliable source they can trust. Okay, so let's talk. I think we'll like kind of wrap shortly after this, but I think it's important. We've touched on some of these things, but we can have this open conversation around what's not supportive, because we've talked a lot here today around what the immune system, so hopefully by now folks know or have a better idea what the immune system is, the different parts of it, the different functions, what they can do to support it, what they can do to support themselves if they feel like they're getting sick or they were exposed to something. What shouldn't we be doing? And I'll let you start with your first point that you made in our little notes.
Yeah. So fear, and I feel very passionately about this in terms of what we've seen over the last year and a half and my own personal experience that I'm not going to go into too much here today, but fear weakens our immune system by 50%. That's a study that's been repeated over and over and over again. It
Wow.
weakens our immune system by 50% because we go into fight or flight mode, reactive mode, instead of rest and digest, and this more of like this acceptance mode. I like to think about it as like, if we're in fear, we're resisting. And if we're, what's the opposite of fear? I mean, people say love, but in this regard, that doesn't, if we're calm, maybe we'll say we're more
We're in
accepting.
trust.
Trust. Yeah, I like that. Yep. If we're in trust, we're more accepting. So it's really important when you feel sick to keep calm. And what I've been saying for the last year and a half, literally preaching it, is when there's so much unknown, and I personally love the world of the unknown, but a lot of us aren't comfortable with that. So when there's so much unknown, can we ground ourselves in what we do know? Can we use what we do know rather than panic? So going back to what we do know, which we've discussed a lot in this conversation today, of how we can support our body rather than panic. And for me, the best thing to do if I feel like I am in fear is just get it out into nature, hug a tree, put your feet on the ground. When you're in that panic mode, there's no reason to consume more information. And this is something I am guilty of and I'm healing on. But we don't need more information when we're panicked. We actually need less. So just putting your phone down, stopping Dr. Google, and going out into nature, just hugging a tree, putting your feet in the ground, allowing to sit in that will most likely connect yourself. And this is something Emily has helped me work on a lot, will help you connect to your own intuition so that you can hear and connect to what is it that you really need. I think that's a really great first step to take, because this idea, again, of if we are in fear of our environment, our defenses are up. If we are in trust,
which means that they are already overstimulated. So we're going into that place of like, they might not be able to do the job as best they can.
Absolutely. We're like going to be on fire.
Yeah.
Dial turned all the way up. If we think about our immune system like a dial turned all the way up. Exactly. If we're in trust and acceptance, then we can be in this more balanced, fluid state. And that is something that our body can work with and approach. We're not shut down, we're open.
Yeah. I feel like I have so many things to say on this topic, but I think the most important thing is that, well, just to reiterate what you said, is if you find yourself in a place of fear, do what you can to get out of that state before making any decisions. Because
with that, yes.
If you're just constantly making decisions from fear, you're feeding fear. You can feed fear, you can feed, well, like we've said, trust or love. And also I'm been going deep into my studies of consciousness and the universe. And I came across a passage in a book the other day that really resonated, because a lot of teachers, especially like in the yoga world, the health and wellness world, are like, only love is real. And what we know of love is, we think of romantic love, we think of sexual love, maybe we even think of like platonic friend love. We think of the love as an emotion. But when we say when you're in fear or you're in love, being in love is being in trust. It's being in connection to something bigger than you. It's not an emotion. It's a truth. It's a knowing. And so if you can get yourself to that place, and then only you will know the decision that's right for you. I was having a really sensitive conversation with a friend the other day about vaccines, which we're not going to talk about today. But the point of this conversation was like, only she could know what was right for her. Only you can know what's right for you. And that might evolve over time. You might get new information over time. And the only way for you to feel more, how do I even want to say this? The best path forward for you is unique. And only you can know that. Your path in this lifetime is unique. Maybe your path is to get coronavirus. Maybe your path is to have some sort of autoimmune disease. I'm not saying that to trivialize the like pain of these things, but you cannot predict what's going to happen out here. You can only make choices from in here. And so much of connecting to what you said about like, don't go to Dr. Google. Yeah. Most of the media, news articles that are informative are based on fear, because fear is a driving force. Yes. For sure.
It hooks you.
It hooks you. But again, if you continue to feed fear, if you continue to make choices from fear, you're going to continue to feed fear. And so how can you just a little bit more tune into that place of trust? And that might be turning off the news for a little while. I don't really watch the news, but I totally turned it off during last year. And also I've gotten off of social media at this point because it was just clouding my vision. And I think that connected with this is, you mentioned this, is like fear puts us in our fight or flight. Anything that stresses you out is not supportive to your overall health and immunity. So if like if a decision is stressing you out, or something is stressing you out, oh, is this right? Is this wrong? Like, how can you take that stress off of yourself? And it might just be to, I don't want to use the vaccine example here. What do I want to use? I don't know. But anything that's stressing you out is going to take you out of that place of connecting more deeply with yourself. It's going to trigger, it's not going to put you in a place where you can fight off viruses or move through viruses. So if for you, for many people, nature, for me too, like nature can be super healing. And but it might also be like getting off the networks, getting off the social media, or booking a time for a massage, which, as we've talked about, is good for your immune system anyways. Like it's helping you on so many levels. So what can you do to de-stress? And something here that is interesting, and I know that this impacted a lot of people in the last year, was like physical touch. Touch can be so healing. And so if it's stressing you out more to like not see someone or not be with someone, like you get to decide like what is true to you, what's going to be more beneficial. This is actually a good example. My grandmother, many people who know me know my grandmother is 99 years old. She is amazing. And her health hasn't been great the last like year. And who knows if it's just her natural progression or also this like isolation, but I can totally see. And I think a lot of people who have elderly parents or grandparents have seen this, how it's impacted them, not necessarily a virus, but like the lack of social interaction, the lack of connection has really impacted them. And so we were in this place, especially in the midst of the pandemic, of like, well, do we isolate her because she's an at-risk population and like we don't want to put her in at risk for any exposure? But at the end of the day, we had to find a gray area because she was much more happy and much more healthy when she could have interaction with people that she loved. And we did it in a way that felt safe and felt good for all parties. So I think that's a good example. The last thing that I want to share here, and this is a tip that I've been giving out a lot recently, which is interesting. I mean, makes sense, but I think fear and stress can also trigger us in a place of anxiety, or anxiety can stress fear. Anxiety can trigger fear and stress. And anxiety really is living too much in the future. It's like being too much in a future moment. And my easy way for dealing with anxiety is, one, to tell the whole story. So what are you afraid of? What is the thing that's causing you so much stress, really making you feel those fluttering in your heart or sick to your stomach or whatever it is? Tell the whole story and then finish it. If I were to get, let's not use coronavirus. What's something that could cause people anxiety? What's something that causes me anxiety? Okay, if all of my clients leave and I have no business left, then what? You don't just stop at like, oh my God, what if all my clients leave and I have no work to do? That's anxiety producing, but finish the story. And then I have many other skills that I can use. I have a very supportive family environment and a supportive friend network that I could fall into should I need that sort of support. So hopefully that gives people a little tool to take away if you are feeling, because these things are not as easy as like take this amount of vitamin C or do this breathwork practice.
Yeah.
But tell the whole story. And that might be hard and it might feel challenging in the moment to think, oh, what if this person might die? Like what, because that could be something that causes people anxiety, especially with like elderly folks. What if this relationship ends? Tell the whole story and then finish it. What would happen? The truth is you would be okay. You might be hurt, but you would in most situations, you'd be okay and you'd figure it out and you're very resourceful. And the fear comes from a little bit of the unknown, but we go into the fear-based unknown versus like, oh, well, I would actually be fine. I have lots of options.
Yes. And I mean, not to go too much into the getting coronavirus example, but this has been one of my biggest issues with the way that the media has portrayed the coronavirus, again, in fear of like, you get the coronavirus and you die, because you turn on CNN and they have the amount of people that are dying and like, that's really what they're feeding. But what is your plan if you do get the coronavirus? Mm-hmm. What is your plan? What are the supplements that you're going to take? How are you going to move your body? How are you going to keep yourself calm? And if you have a plan, then again, getting to the end result, it can take you out of the spinning because you have a plan.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like just going into, we do have a little bit more information specifically with this virus of like, for most people, your chances are, for most people, and truthfully, for most people watching this video here today that fall within some age range and certain demographics, like you, most likely you will be okay.
99.997%.
Thank you, Dr. Brown.
997% that you will be okay.
And I think that's like not to say, again, it's not to say that this hasn't been a challenging time. That's not to say that tragedies won't happen or emergencies won't happen. Like, again, this is, no one can guarantee what's going to happen in your life, but like you get to choose how you move through it. And are you going to move through your whole life from a place of fear and a place of following somebody else's path? Or are you going to say, hey, I have a say in this? Yeah. Okay, sermon over.
Exactly. And reminding yourself that we actually live in the safest time that there's ever been to live. Gotta
look at that. We live in the safest time
ever. And there's a really good TED talk on this, but I'll summarize. Because we live in such a safe time where we don't have to worry about getting eaten by a bear, right? Because we have so many of these natural comforts, it and there's a psychology on this, but it frees up so much time and space because you don't have to think about that real threat. So then you're
We
hyper
worry about all these like hypothetical things.
trivial hypothetical things.
Dude, I feel that. And this is
Yeah.
interesting. Again, a little tangential, but I filmed a video about this in my Taurus season reflections. Is I have the most free time right now that I've had probably in my entire adult life. And I could say that like my life is, I mean, I will say my life is great. Things that I wanted, I have time, space, nature, friends, like these things that are important, that are actually important to me. And having that time and having a business that's like kind of morphing and shifting and changing is interesting, because it's opened up this space. And if I am having to be really, really diligent about how I am filling that space, because a lot of what's programmed into me is to fill that space with worry and anxiety and fear. So I say these things and I say these like tools and tips because they are my lifeline. Otherwise I'd be in like a puddle of anxiety and, just feeling like it's a catch-22 of living in a modern world. Like we're not being chased by bears. We're not like most of us, again, and most people watching this video are not fighting for their life every single day, or like not sure if they're going to see the next day because, food or lions or tigers
Right.
or what have you.
Yeah.
But we make up other things. And that's probably, like you said, psychology, like the survival mechanism, but you also get to choose. And I think that's the time that we live in, is that we have this space, we have a little bit more awareness, and we get to choose which future we're feeding, which belief systems we're feeding, and how we want to spend this time in this lifetime.
Love that.
Okay, so let's just summarize. Anything else that you want to add or share? You've shared a lot with us today. I'm so appreciative of you and your information and your research. It's so helpful. And I can't wait to take more of this and like refine, put some of it into action in my life in a bigger way.
Yeah, I guess just one more thing that came up when you were talking about stress. I just think, for me too, like we learned stress is bad. So then anytime I'm stressed, I'm like, oh my God, I'm stressed and this is terrible. Okay. For me, this really helped just to put it into perspective. A little bit of stress is a good thing. That's what gets us moving and taking action in the
Totally.
world. And actually, in the morning, that going out into sunlight, what that does is allows cortisol, which is our stress hormone, to spike, which we want. We want it to spike so that we can go and have our day and go about the world. That kind of acute stress is normal. It's the chronic stress, the ruminating thoughts over and over and over and over again that weakens the immune system or leads to us being susceptible to disease or poor health. So a little bit of stress is a good thing. So
Totally.
taking an enemy with stress, which is something that I was guilty on, and bringing myself back from has been so helpful in my life, is that little bit of stress is good. It's when it's constantly turned on. And actually, Dr. Mark Hyman talks about this, but the idea of active rest every day helps our stress response. And active rest not being sitting watching television, meditating, yoga, journaling, walk in nature, just something every day to actively rest is what helps keep that stress response in balance. So
thank you for highlighting that, because you're correct in that we can even vilify stress is, it's like, oh, fat gets vilified, sugar gets vilified, stress gets, we're always trying to find one thing. There's no one thing.
Right.
Again, nature is, we talked about this before we started recording. Nature is a lot smarter than our conscious minds. And it's not, there's so much nuance. I have two wonderful clients, both coaches, who speak and coach on having an empowered relationship with your stress, which I love that term, because it's not just about having no stress in your life. Otherwise, you're literally just like a couch potato.
Yeah.
You're just like, you can't even get up in the morning. So that's
Right.
important to note as well.
Yeah. Yes.
All right, my friends, I hope that this was super informative. Again, I found it very informative and fun, and hopefully it gave you something to think about, and a lot of easy, tangible action items. Healthy immunity is not just about not getting sick. It's not just about taking a supplement during flu season. It is your lifestyle. And let's just bump it up. Bigger picture here is like, when you feel good, when you have energy, when you're not constantly having a runny nose or having a cough, or like, waking up feeling foggy, you're more present and more able to live your life. So it's not just about the like sickness that takes you out. And sometimes we do need to be taken out and like full horizontal for a few days. But it really is so that you can be here and be present for more of your purpose on this planet. So we hope that you have some great takeaways. Dr. Brown, how can folks connect with you?
You can find me at Eyes on Wellness on Instagram. I hang out there a lot for now.
We'll link it, and connect with her, follow her there if you haven't already. Good things coming from her space for sure. And I'm probably going to be posting this video on my YouTube, which is a great way for you to connect with me. If you're new to me, hi, nice to meet you. I also send out a weekly-ish email newsletter, which I'll put the link below. And that's all.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, you're so welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And of course, folks, anyone watching this video, please like it, share it, leave a comment. This was a very like in-depth conversation that we had here, but it truly is the beginning of a broader conversation. And we really want to hear your thoughts, what resonated with you, what you're taking away. That makes this so much more meaningful. So leave a comment and we'll be looking out for those. All right, y'all. We'll talk to you soon. Ending the recording, stopping the recording, not ending the